Okay, Alex, thanks for meeting me with me again.
Yep.
So today, or what we're doing here is reflecting on the PGP that you've written
Okay.
out. I know we're mid-year here, so it's a little different than doing an end-of-year reflection. So most of this is just gonna be how are you going. I want you
Okay.
again to talk most of the time.
Okay.
It's for, you to kind of reflect. I do have some questions, you've already seen them. At the end, we'll discuss when we're gonna review this PGP again, maybe talk about a timeline for any actions, if there are any resources that you would need, okay?
Okay.
Okay, well, all right, very good. Summarize your goal for me, tell me about your
Alright,
PGP.
so my PGP is a continuation of my goal from last year where I'm trying to better match my assessments to the objectives that I teach in class. That kind of bigger picture, maybe it's sort of broader picture of each test is over certain specific objectives. Instead of being like a chapter 5 test, I'll have maybe smaller tests over the objectives. I number my objectives in class. So objectives 20 and 21, this test might be over objectives 22 through 25. And even on those, maybe try to break those down as much as I can so to more match what the objectives are. So students know what the tests are. And if they don't do well on tests or would like to retake it, we can focus in on the specific objective instead of you need to retake the chapter 2 test instead of you need to retake the objective 22 test. So I ran into a couple years ago where students would struggle in just one part of the objective, but then I made them retake the entire test, I don't know if that made sense. So I tried to focus in my tests on the objectives a little bit more and break them into chunks. So that's what I'm doing right now. Is I'm trying to. Last year I did my pre-cal class. I really liked the way it turned out. So now I'm doing it with my Algebra 1A and 1B classes.
So you're taking your assessments, and I know you do a great job, we talked about that in the observation, having those objectives up there.
Board, yeah.
And then you talk about them. I know we talked about this in our meeting, but all the times that you would state them, and even the kids were engaging in the objectives. So now you're making sure when it comes to an assessment, they know what they're gonna be assessed on, which objective it ties to, and then that allows some opportunity for reteaching as well.
Yeah, so students in my class, when we take our notes, I'll tell them go get an objective sheet. Today we're covering objective 22. Like today's objective was objective 22. So they'll take notes over only that, and then when we're done with objective 22, we'll go to objective 23. So ideally, students have an objective 22. Now maybe it's front and back, maybe it's a couple. But if I have a 22 and a 23, then I tell them before the test starts. If it's a test on Friday, I'll start telling them on Monday. If not, maybe Tuesday, but most of the time on Monday. All right, you got a test at the end of the week. It's going to be over objectives 20, 21, 22, and 23. So night before the test, or even whenever they want to do it, they have objective sheet for 20, 21, 22, 23, and then with their old problems and bell ringer stuff too. But they should know exactly what's on the test, what's going to be covered. And then if they don't do well on the test, kind of the big idea is maybe you did really well on objectives 20, 21, and 23, but 22 you struggled with. We don't have to go over all those other things again, and you don't have to retake that. If you've shown me already you've done well on it, we can focus in on 22 and hopefully master that a little bit more.
Yep.
So it takes time to do. So it takes time to do and make those tests. So that was my PGP for this year, was to make those tests and start focusing those in a little bit more.
What kind of progress have you made?
So I'm through objectives 23. So in my 1A class, and then where we're at in 1B, I think we're in 61. So I'm current to where we are. So a lot of it this year is taking tests I already have, identifying what objectives being taught, and then tested over, and then putting those all together, or making new ones. So there's sometimes I already have all the tests created already. I just have to make sure they match up the objectives and put those all together. Sometimes I can see, I'm a little short on questions for 18, so I got to come up with a couple new assessment questions for 18. At least I don't have them there.
Sure.
So then, also my idea is if we ever do switch books or switch curriculums, it's still over content, so they might not all match the same, but I should have a lot of information over solving inequalities. I have assessments there, so I'm hoping then they transfer over when we get new curriculum too, whenever.
So you're teaching standards.
Yeah.
And specific skills and concepts, not teaching.
Yeah, so that's what I did my first couple of years. Then I moved schools too, so I ended up being basically all the stuff I carried a little bit over, but all the stuff I taught at my first school for a year and a half, I really couldn't use that well, or it's tough to match them up. This one I'm hoping it matches up a little bit better.
So what do you feel best about doing this process?
I feel best about, at least I think the way it helps students. I really think it helps them focus in on objectives and values their time a little bit, where if you don't have to retake the entire test. Oh, I really struggled on this, so you really know what you struggle too. You know what you struggle with, you know what you do well with, instead of saying, chapter 3 didn't go well, chapter 4 went well. It's,
Right.
I struggled with this, I struggled with this specific part. The other thing too that helps me a little bit with is students with prolonged absences.
Mm-hmm.
Like one of the reasons I started doing this too, on top of that, was I had a girl that missed like 2 weeks in a row in a pre-calculus class, and trying to get her ready for a test when she was missing all her other,
Right.
it was a bear, and I kind of felt like I was doing a disservice to her, because I was teaching it quick, the small part where she could still understand it, but that's a lot of information to put on her. But if we could have went by objectives, all right, let's focus in on this objective, let's get that under control, then the next objective and the next objective, I think it would have went better. So there's got to be a better way to do that. But so I think just with the students, I think it helps the students catch up, focus on the information, and hopefully master the objectives.
And you do something, a little different in your pre-calc as far as pacing. Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
When I started last year, it was more to kind of the pre-calc students pace themselves and what they're comfortable with. So in pre-calc, every other Friday is a test day, where if you don't want to pace yourself, it's just here's a test day, and these objective tests take 5 minutes. Some take 2, some take 5, some maybe take 7, but on average 5 minutes. So you can take 6, 7 in one class period if you want, but in my pre-calc class, you can come in and you can just take a 5-minute test.
Right.
Hey, I'm ready for this test now. Let's take it. I know this objective. This one I'm really struggling with. I need some more time with. So you kind of pace yourself, and there's index cards, and there's
Right.
other parts of the system. But the timing piece for them, they can, whether it be in seminar, study hall, even if I give them 15 minutes at the end of the day to work on their assignment. If the last 10 they want to work on an objective test and take that home with them, there's built-in times for those. So it's a little more self-paced for them. They're my upper level math students. They're kind of, for the algebra 1A and 1B, I wasn't comfortable having those students self-pace themselves. So what I've done is that I said we're going to have a test here, and you are taking these tests. You're going to take 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Here are the objectives that are going to be on this test. And then I try to break it up a little bit too, so it's kind of like 3 smaller tests together. So instead of them pacing themselves, I just don't know how well that would go.
Yep.
And maybe someday we can get to there if I find a better system for it. But for right now, I'll say, all right, you have test day Friday. It'll be over these objectives, and I make them take those objective tests on those days.
Great.
Pre-calc is a little bit, even on test days, I leave it up to them which ones they want to, and then if it's late, I put a deadline on it, and if they don't have those in by then it goes into as missing as a grade book, and until they
You
get
got
those
some
in.
other things.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good. Has there been anything that was surprising? I mean, has there been anything that wasn't? You talked about a lot of
Yeah.
really good things. Is there anything that was surprising, or even something that maybe it was like, oh, geez, I didn't foresee that?
Yeah, the first year I did that, my pre-calc, I didn't put those deadlines on. The students that were way behind, I communicated with parents that, hey, these are missing, they will go in the grade book as a 0 eventually. I didn't feel comfortable putting it as 0, just thinking that they might think it's a 0. And, so we ran into a little bit where, I just thought, so the kid has, 15 tests that I've been on them, parents been on them, and then they go into 0 at the end of the semester. It turns into, I didn't know that it was.
Yeah.
So
using the system just
a little bit, at least from my opinion, whether that's what happened or not. But anyway, so this year I put deadlines on them where if it's not in by then, it's a missing. So it's still not a 0, but it's a missing, which counts as a 0 in the grade book. So
just an alert.
Yeah, so just just kind of keep plugging away into the system, find something that works. In my algebra 1A and 1B classes, I thought I would have more people retake smaller portions of the test. I haven't had a lot, as many as I thought. There's still some, like anything, some students really take advantage of it, do things, and the other ones you wish would a little bit more. But I thought breaking it down with smaller parts of the test, where if there's 3 sections of it, I did really well on these 2. This one I struggled with. If I put a little bit of time and really focus on that, I haven't had as much of that as I would have hoped. Now, I don't know if that's something I got to promote more, which I tried talking, or if it's just some students in 1A, 1B motivations maybe just not there as much as it is in other classes where I get what I get. I don't know. I thought breaking up that way would help a little, and it has for some, but I expect a little bit more, I guess.
So will, from that, do you have any kind of steps you're gonna take to, you talked about them not being quite motivated.
Yeah.
Motivating students is one of our indicators.
Yeah.
Have you thought about anything, said, okay, now you're not doing what I expected, what
Yeah.
can I do?
I've thought about it. I don't know if I came up with anything good yet. I think maybe, this is the first year I've done it too, so maybe even for some students, it might just be even at the end of the semester, if I can point out, once you start second semester, if you're right on the edge here, a retake here or there might push this from a here to here, maybe all the way,
Right.
maybe motivate by grade. I know that's not the best way to do it, but it is a motivating
Some
factor.
people it is. Some
Yeah,
people.
for some, it is a factor where, if I can point that out to them, maybe some students just don't realize how much of an effect it could have. I just pointed out, after every test, if you want to retake, I always tell them the retake options, even though they probably heard it 7-8 times already.
Right.
So I try to just keep it fresh in their mind, and sometimes I think, retake has a negative connotation
Yeah.
to it for
Yeah.
some students. So I try to make that positive. I just keep doing that, but I don't know if there's something else I gotta plug in to motivate those students, but that's the current thing in my mind is maybe at the end of the semester, say, hey, now if you are, 'cause that's kind of when a lot of those students will kind of want to try to get there. Is like,
Yeah.
now if we would have done this earlier, maybe I'm
Yeah.
gonna see how that takes it there, but we'll see where it goes.
Okay, good. What have you learned from the evidence, from the observations in the first semester that relates to your plan? Is there anything, we've had 2 of them.
Yeah.
Is there anything in that evidence that you've learned from that?
Well, I think maybe just reinforces that having those standards and objectives I think is helpful. I know those are always one thing we talk about, and then one thing I always get written on those reflections that I get, or the notes or data that I get, is the reflections are, standards and objectives are good, they're stated, students seem to have an idea of what's going on, so I really try to tie everything back to there. So I don't know if anything new, but maybe just reinforcing that, those structures are in place, the system's in place, and
Yeah.
it's being used.
In the work. So you're what you're doing, you feel like you're pretty strong with it, at least for the first
Yeah.
semester, and you're kind of going to just
Yeah.
keep moving, as they say. All right. We talked about students taking advantage the work you're doing. So some of them are taking advantage
Yeah.
of the work. Yeah. And you'd just like to see more. Adjustments, and one of the questions we talked about adjustments, but I think you've kind of already talked about that.
Yeah, I think trying things as it goes, especially with something that's new, you're always kind of see what works, what doesn't work. I know that last year in pre-calc, I added that second semester right away where we're having deadlines. This year in the pre-calc, I'm still doing it this year in pre-calc, where the quiz at the end, I kind of put a deadline on that too. I guess I haven't talked about that.
Yeah.
They're kind of smaller objective tests, and what I like to do is put a quiz at the end. It's kind of like what your normal test would be, is a
Yeah.
quiz.
Yeah.
And I make it a take-home quiz for them, so you're tying that all together, but maybe not in class, so we don't have to lose instructional time.
Right.
But you still put everything together, and it's a small grade. But
What do you use that quiz for? Is that formative assessment, or is
a
that?
little bit of formative, a little bit more summative, probably. Just
Okay.
now that you've seen the smaller chunks of smaller tests, like we said, those objective tests aren't huge. There's a lot of smaller ones. It's, here's everything in this chapter. Here's how it all ties together. Here's a kind
see.
of a wrap up of everything we've seen. Last year, I just had them turn that in whenever, and so we normally get through 4 chapters a semester. I had some that would just turn all 4 in second to last day of the
Right.
year, second to last day of the semester. This year I put deadlines on that. I think that helps. But just trying to see what works, what doesn't work, what can I shore up, what can I make run a little bit smoother.
So you're 18 months into this, really, when
Yeah,
you think about
yeah.
it. So you're making those little
Yeah.
adjustments all the way and reflecting on what you're.
Yeah.
And Alex, reflecting on your practice is such a big deal, and I know that you do that just
Yeah.
in our conversations. That's really good for the students. What does, and the question here, number 8, is what does success look like for your students when you reach your goal? What do you foresee if you would said, oh man, I feel really good about what I'm doing with standards and objectives?
I think especially for my 1A and 1B, which I'm doing right now, is just when you start seeing kids have a little confidence. We do a lot of board stuff, doing it on the board, working with your partner, just especially those 1A, 1B students that haven't had a lot of success in math in the past. How can you build them, get a little more confidence? So I think with those objective tests, it's smaller, it's more focused, it's maybe more detailed. I don't know. So they know exactly what to expect.
Yeah.
It's not just a huge overwhelming thing. So I think having the test this way, I can really focus in. I know it's going to be this. I have things that I can look at. Sometimes, it's tough to study for math. It's a process, more of a memorization of facts.
Right.
Where if they know, okay, this is what I need to have. I think it's just when you start seeing that confidence with, kids that didn't at the beginning of the year, first part of the year, doesn't go to the board, and now I see a couple kids that
Right.
more willing to go to the board. For me, that's the success for me. And then obviously grades too. You
Sure.
get I'd like to see everybody here,
Mm-hmm.
but just kind of the smaller things where kids that weren't here earlier kind of growing and get there and are confident in themselves that they can do that.
Then you talked a little bit about more kids taking retakes or
Yeah.
retaking portions. That certainly means they got confidence enough to say,
Yeah.
well, this 75% I have is not good enough. If I take this port, I know.
Yeah, that matters. It matters to me
Yeah.
that I'm disappointed in this. I'd like to do better, and there's an option for me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I taught that class, so a lot of times those guys are like, whew, D-, I got
No,
it
I
done.
know.
Yes.
No, I know.
And that's frustrating.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. When you don't get the reaction you wanted,
Right.
or not wanted, maybe expected.
Yeah.
That I think you really struggled on this, or I wish you probably could have done a lot better. Oh, not yet.
Yeah.
Well, which is good to it. Some good to that too, but that.
Eventually you see that
Yeah.
success being
Yeah.
those kids that are really moving
Yeah.
a little bit in that
Yeah.
way. Yeah, absolutely. Now, one of the growth areas we had in our observations that you're continuing to work on is question. And I know we're mid-year here too. Is that anything that you want to adjust, or is that something you're going to kind of wait for? What do you think with
The questioning?
Yeah.
No, I'll focus on this because I want to make sure I got this down, and kind of is always in the system too. If there's
Mhm.
things along the way I can kind of think of that might make you always reflect along the way. Like
Mhm.
as I make these objective tests, is there something I can add to those? Can I get to that next level? If we're adding those questionings in class, maybe that leads to something else we covered, and I can ask or assess the same content, but maybe in a different way, maybe in a higher level thinking.
Sure.
So I think as I make these tests, which a lot of them I already have, I just have to reorganize. But there's some where I do have to make new questions for. I'd say that's by half and half. I have some on bank, and I use some new ones where maybe I can, as I go through, how do I want to assess
Right.
as I make these tests?
Yeah. So you're still, that's still gonna be, as we've got 2 more observations to do
Yeah.
through the year, so that's gonna continue to be part of your planning, but, you're gonna probably just wait on that
Yeah.
as far as PGE, and I can understand that. Well, what supports do you need, as you continue through this semester? What could I do for you, or is there things that, outside of what we already do that you could?
Oh, probably not. I know that I could be sometimes just how did you, since you taught this before, so maybe in a different role, but just how in 1A and 1B, how did you handle this, or
Right.
what worked well for you? So maybe that's more of a broader class thing than a specific assessment thing. But I think assessment, I have it under control, but
Good.
nothing specific.
Well, anytime you have those questions, it's been a pleasure to sit on a couple classes and
Yeah.
be in your classroom, so when those things, I can be support when you need it,
Yeah.
so you don't feel like you can't do that. Okay, a couple things to consider in here. It says we got a time to review again, and I think generally we have it, we do that in May
Okay.
of the following year, right, or the May of this coming
Yeah,
year.
this year.
So we'll go ahead and put down that, and that'll be after your last 2 observations
Yeah.
as well, so we'll be able to kind of pull some things together with that. Is there any other timeline that you need as far as of looking at this PGP again, other than May? Is there anything we need to review stepwise? Because what I hear you say is that things are right on
Yeah.
track where you ought to be. Is there any time other than our next observation?
Well, I know in TAP classes we have to update this PGP 4 times a year, I think.
Yeah.
So I think I've updated it twice.
Yep.
So I think in TAP classes
Yeah.
I'll probably upload. I'll probably my
So we can-
timeline.
Right, so we can work through that, good. So in TAP classes, you've got two more to do anyway
I
along.
think so. It might be 3. I know I've updated at least once. I think twice.
Okay.
So normally what I do, I just say I've updated up through objective tests up through this, and I just list which
Sure.
ones I have and
Sure.
haven't. So I think I'm 2 in.
Good, in good shape then. you know, I think that's all we have working through here. You know, the three things we did is talk about a time when we're gonna review it again, which we're gonna do that in TAP, and then in May, at the end of the year, we'll do that together, either me or Mr. Joel.
Yeah.
And then just the timeline, you kinda just talked about updating it
Yeah.
twice through the timeline, and resources and supports, you're gonna you're gonna use me when you need me,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
And of course, Brenda's a consistent, in TAP class as well,
Yeah.
so. Anything else you wanna add?
No.
Very good. Well, I thank you for letting me be in your classroom and taking time to discuss your PGP as long as also your practices in the classroom. So
Yeah.
I look forward to getting in there every time.
Yeah, anytime.
All right, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks.